Welcome back to step 5, where we will be adding the diff and adding the dampers, and we're almost there. So without further ado, we'll unbag the diff. Diff comes pre-assembled in most of the kits. We have had some come through which are not built, so this one is a built diff. Open both packets. You have the out drives with the hexes, which are these. This is the icon diff, which we've decided to use. So we take the built diff, which is all set, ready to go. That goes over the top and is held in place with 3 M3 button heads. So just put them in gently to start off with, and then you can go round and tighten them up one by one. Goes on there, so just nip, same again. They don't need to be lent on, so just nip them up. We'll put the nut for the wheels on so we don't lose it, and then on the other side we have the spacer and the adapter. But what we'll do first is we'll take the car and pop the diff through the bearing housings, so it all runs nice and freely. We put the spacer on, the shiny side inside. That slides on. Just have it so you've got a little bit of end float, and what I mean by end float for some of you is that the axle just moves backwards and forwards slightly. There are people that use little gauges or a piece of paper just so they get a little bit of side movement. Nip this up again, same again. It's aluminium. If you start leaning on this too tightly, 1, it stretches, and 2, you end up pulling the thread through. So we just recommend that you just put the screwdriver in and nip it. It's not going to come undone. Then the adapter goes on, 3 button head screws again, and locate the first one, locate the second one, and locate the third one. Same again, just nip them into place. That's all they need. And we'll put the nut on so we don't lose it, and move on to my favourite job, building dampers. Here you go. So rear diff fitted, everything moves freely, a little bit of side motion. The pod, you can see that pod moves up and down, and the droop screw in place. So we'll get on to build the dampers. Dampers all come in a separate bag. I've put some instructions in there along with the other instruction sheet of this is how the front damper goes together. We've assembled most of it apart from putting the ball joints on, and the side dampers we have a small spring which goes inside the dampers, and we adjust the length of the dampers to take into account doing the tweak on your car. So we'll crack on. So that's your front damper. Notice there's no spring inside the front damper because we have the spring on the back of the car. So that's the front damper. So we'll start off by building the brace. So in the brace pack you'll get a piece of carbon, 2 M3 button head screws which go through the top and secure onto the pod on those 2 positions. So the easiest way to do it is if you offer this up to the car, you'll see that when that lays over the top there is a hole through here which allows you to get to the screw for the centre ball. It's worth checking that every other race just to make sure that it's still tight. I've not had one come undone, but it's always good to check. So the hole there is for where that screw, you can access the screw. So we'll put the dampers together. So we have these little ball studs. They go up through the carbon. Just bear with me a second, I need to go and grab another spanner. I seem to have left one off my bench. I thought I was doing really well. I've built virtually all of this car and I've had every tool to hand. So we basically, that goes through the carbon, got a little tiny black nut that goes on the other side, and just tighten that in place. So that's the first one. Take another one through the carbon and a little nut goes on the back. Tighten that up. That's the 2. They go underneath, so the dampers hang underneath the carbon. Then the front damper is on a little standoff. Going back to the black and the silver, we will have these shortly in black and we will send them out to everybody that has had their kits already, so I do apologise for that. So standoff goes on, that one goes on the top, so it looks, you can see that, and them on the bottom. So take the long button head screws through the carbon on both sides, and then you've got 2 small posts, spacers, posts, whatever we like to call them. They go to lift this support away from the pod. So if I can get this, so they go on top of the pod like that. Just that, and then I can bring it up and show you. So it goes through the pod, and that just gently tighten those up again. So you have the pod support mounted and the 2 balls underneath and the front damper ball on top. Once we've done that, we've got 2 more balls. They go on the outside of your LiPo holder. Same again, in from the top, 2 M3s, nuts on the other side, tighten them up. That's on one side, and the other one goes on the other side. M3 nut again. So you now have 2 ball studs on the outer LiPo holder, the centre support. All we have to do now is assemble the shocks, oil them up, and away we go. So the black aluminium, you take the ball plastic stud, and screw that on all the way. It's not the easiest of jobs because they're quite slippery, the black aluminium. So you do that on the 2 side damper tubes. Now we've started off with a base setup of damper tubes and springs. We will have some tech sheets coming out once we get back out and continue our testing, but we started off with 12,000 on the side, and we're going to go 30,000 on the front damper with silver springs in the side dampers, and we got gold springs on the front kingpins. That's our base setup, but I'm sure that will change as grip levels change, tracks change and so on, but we'll have those tech sheets available shortly. So once you've done the 2 side aluminium dampers, you take the grub screw, which is a little black M3 grub screw, and screw that into the end of the serrated damper insert tube. So screw that all the way in. It bottoms out. Don't over tighten that in there, because if you screw that in too tight it will shear off where the little knurled rings are. So all you need to do is put that in so it just bottoms out, and that's tight enough. Take your other ball stud and tighten that up so that hits the bottom of the plastic, like so. Okay. We take a spring and we drop that into the damper tube on both sides. So that's your side springs in place. We'll just put the other grub screw in the other damper. And put the plastic end on. Now I've seen loads and loads of ways of doing side damper tubes. My way may not be the right way, but it's always worked for me. So you take your 12,000, put some damper goo onto your damper insert, like that. I tend to roll the oil so it gets into all of those grooves. And then take your rod and put it into the aluminium damper and just rotate the aluminium so it's sort of screwing it on, and then it keeps as much oil in the damper as possible. So you then should have a sprung damper. That's one done. Prop that one up there. Do the same on your other damper. Roll it around. Take your damper tube and just roll that on. Make sure the spring's in there. And then with your front damper, we use 30,000 and coat the front damper and do the same. And put that one in. Just bear in mind the front one doesn't have a spring, so you'll push the damper tube in and it will hit the bottom and it won't do the same as what you thought it was going to do with the sprung loaded one, but that's the front damper. So put that to one side. We'll put the side ones on first. So the easiest way to do it is you take the damper, aluminium goes to the outside and the shaft goes to the inside. The reason that is they're slightly at an angle and the oil will always run into the tube. So put your damper button, pair of ball grip pliers and press that in place, bring it around to the outside and pop that one on. Do the same on the other side. Can press them on, but after a while your finger starts to hurt. So that's the side dampers fitted and side movement, it's all nice. So with the front damper we have the LiPo spacer support which goes onto the chassis, and this comes already built in the kit as well. It's the black spacer bar with the ball joint and an M3 screw that goes through the chassis, through the LiPo spacer and into the rod, and then you adjust your LiPo bar. You see it probably better from underneath. That just spaces out, so when you put the LiPo in it doesn't shoot forward. Most people put their radio gear, your ESC here and your receiver here. We've just added that in. We will, as time goes by, be testing moving the LiPo backwards and forwards, so you'll have a bar here and you'll have another little bar which is underneath, which these extra holes in the chassis are to allow you to move the weight transfer forward and back. But for now we've included this so it holds the LiPo and doesn't shoot forward. So then we take the damper for the front, same again. We put the aluminium part to the front and pop that onto the top of the pod. It's probably going to be done with a pair of pliers. Not the easiest ones to get to. And we are getting closer to finishing your FP1. So we now have dampers, we now have the diff fitted. All we've got left to do is to put the body posts on, cut the body shell out, and do the track rods. We will be back shortly for the final part of this build.